Awakening of the Eternal Warrior. The cold, sterile air filled the ancient cave as the group of alien explorers entered cautiously. Their scanners beeped faintly, signaling something unusual buried deep beneath the surface. Led by Krell, a tall, blue-skinned alien with glowing eyes, the team of 5 had been searching for relics of ancient civilizations for months. But today, something different awaited them. "This is it," Krell said, his voice tense with excitement. "We found something big." The other explorers exchanged nervous glances. It wasn't uncommon to find remnants of long-lost species, but this felt different. The energy readings were off the charts, and whatever lay ahead wasn't just some forgotten artifact. It pulsed with life. As they dug through layers of dirt and debris, the explorers uncovered a large metallic pod, smooth and untouched by time. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, and it seemed to hum with a faint glow. "What do you think it is?" asked Rena, the youngest of the team, her voice trembling slightly. "A stasis pod," Krell replied. "But this design, it's nothing like we've ever seen. And these markings, could they be human?" The word sent a shiver through the group. Humans were a species they had only heard about in ancient stories. Tales of powerful, terrifying warriors who had once roamed the stars. But that was millennia ago. No human had been seen in the galaxy for ages. Most believed them to be extinct. Without hesitation, Krell pressed a button on the side of the pod, causing it to hiss open. Cold mist poured out, revealing the figure inside, a tall, muscular being, frozen in time. He wore battle armor, scared and worn from countless battles. His face, though peaceful, carried the weight of 1,000 wars. "Ease, alive," Rena whispered in awe. Suddenly, the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing with a fierce intensity. The pod's interior lights flickered, and the alien explorers took a step back, unsure of what they had just unleashed. The human warrior slowly rose from the pod, his movements deliberate but filled with strength. He looked around, his eyes sharp and focused, scanning the unfamiliar faces of the alien explorers before him. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. The language he spoke was ancient, but the translation devices the aliens wore quickly adjusted. Krell stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're on the planet Terrace 7. We found you buried deep in the ground. How long have you been in there?" The human frowned, trying to remember. His last memory was of Earth, of battles fought to defend humanity from invaders. He recalled the decision to be placed in stasis, knowing that his time was not yet over. He had been Earth's last defense, and if humanity had fallen, then he had failed. "I don't know," the human finally replied. "Who are you? What happened to Earth?" The explorers exchanged uncertain looks. They had no idea how to explain the truth to this ancient being. The humans had vanished from the galaxy ages ago, their once great empire reduced to myths and legends. "We are explorers," Krell said cautiously. "We search for lost civilizations. As for Earth, we don't know. No one's seen a human in thousands of years." The human's expression hardened. Thousands of years. That couldn't be right. He clenched his fists, feeling the strength return to his body after so long in stasis. Whoever these aliens were, they had answers, and he was determined to find out what had happened to his people. "I am Sergeant Eric Kane, last of Earth's shock troopers," the human declared, his voice strong and unwavering. "And if my people are gone, then I will avenge them." The explorers felt a chill run down their spines. This human, this warrior from the past, had just been awakened in their time of need. But they weren't sure if they had unleashed a savior or a destroyer. "We don't mean any harm," Krell quickly added. "We're in a war ourselves. The galaxy has changed, and powerful empires have risen. If you wish to know more, we can help." Eric looked at Krell, his piercing gaze assessing the alien's intentions. "Then tell me everything," he said. "Tell me who my enemies are now." Krell nodded, relieved that the warrior had not attacked them yet. But as the group prepared to leave the cave, one thought lingered in Krell's mind. They had awakened something more powerful than they could understand, and in a galaxy ruled by tyrants, that could be the key to their salvation. Or the galaxy in turmoil. As the alien explorers led Eric Kane back to their ship, the landscape of the planet Terra 7 stretched out before them. Vast, desolate plains filled with jagged rocks and a dark, red sky. The planet's surface had long been abandoned, a reminder of a time when thriving civilizations had once existed, now reduced to ruins. Eric took it all in, his mind racing with questions about what had happened to humanity and the galaxy he once knew. Krell, still cautious but curious, began to explain the current state of affairs. The galaxy has changed in ways you can't imagine, Sergeant Kane. Powerful empires rule the stars now, and many races are enslaved or live in fear. The largest of these is the Galactic Empire, a ruthless regime that controls entire star systems. They've conquered planets and species without mercy. Eric's brow furrowed as he processed this information. And where are the humans in all of this? What became of Earth? Krell paused for a moment, uncertain of how to break the news. No one knows what happened to Earth, he finally said, his voice low. There are rumors, legends, but humans disappeared long ago. Some believe your species was wiped out by the Galactic Empire. Others think you left the galaxy altogether. But for the past 1,000 years, humans have been nothing more than a myth. Eric's fists clenched at his sides, his muscles tensing. The idea that his people had vanished, leaving the galaxy under the control of tyrants, filled him with a sense of deep, burning rage. But beneath that, there was something else. Determination. If humanity was gone, then he would be the one to avenge them. He would remind the galaxy of what it meant to face a human warrior. The alien ship came into view, a sleek silver craft that hovered just above the ground. Eric, though unfamiliar with the technology, admired its efficiency and design. The group boarded quickly, and as the ship rose into the sky, Eric felt the rush of acceleration. His body, still adjusting after centuries of stasis, handled it without issue. His military instincts kicked in, and he began observing everything. His surroundings, the ship's controls, the aliens' behavior. We're part of the rebel coalition, Krell continued as the ship broke through the planet's atmosphere. We've been fighting the Galactic Empire for years, but we're outnumbered and outgunned. When we found you, we hoped maybe you could help us. Eric said nothing for a moment, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space seemed both familiar and alien to him now. Once, he had been part of a fleet that protected humanity's interests. Now he was alone, a relic from a forgotten time. But if there was still a fight to be had, he knew exactly where he belonged. "Tell me about your enemy," Eric finally said, his voice calm but firm. Krell nodded, pulling up a holographic map of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire is vast, controlling hundreds of star systems. Their military is relentless, and they crush any resistance they encounter. We've managed to hold out in the outer rim, but it's only a matter of time before they find us. If they do, we won't stand a chance. As Eric studied the map, he couldn't help but notice the strategic importance of certain locations. Even after centuries of sleep, his tactical mind remained sharp. "You're fighting defensively," he observed. "That's why you're losing. You need to take the fight to them." Krell blinked in surprise. "Take the fight? To the Galactic Empire? That's suicide." "Not if you do it right," Eric replied, turning to face the alien leader. "You need to strike where they're vulnerable. Every empire has weak points. We just need to find theirs." Rena, the young explorer who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "But how can we fight them? They have advanced weapons, fleets, and armies. What do we have?" Eric smiled grimly. "You have me." The ship entered the orbit of a nearby moon, where a small rebel outpost was hidden beneath its surface. As they landed, Eric stepped out, surveying the small group of resistance fighters waiting for them. They were a ragtag group, clearly outnumbered and outclassed by the Empire they fought against. But something in their eyes, fear mixed with hope, reminded him of the humans he had once led into battle. "I've fought against impossible odds before," Eric said as he looked at the gathered rebels. "And I survived. If the Galactic Empire thinks they can rule the galaxy unchecked, they're wrong. I'll make sure they learn what happens when you push too far." Krell and the others exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of this warrior from the past. But they had no other choice. With the Galactic Empire closing in, Eric Kane might just be their last. Shadows of the Empire. As Eric Kane settled into the rebel outpost beneath the surface of the moon, the reality of the situation began to weigh on him. He'd been revived into a galaxy that was no longer his own, a galaxy ruled by fear and oppression under the iron grip of the Galactic Empire. The human race, once powerful, was now little more than a forgotten legend. Inside the outpost, Krell led Eric through narrow corridors, the dull hum of the facility's machinery reverberating through the metal walls. Rebels moved about with purpose, though their numbers were small. They were a mix of different alien races, each with their own scars from the Empire's reign of terror. Some looked at Eric with skepticism, unsure if this ancient human warrior could really help turn the tide. Others saw him as a symbol of hope, a reminder of a time when humans had once been feared and respected throughout the galaxy. In the command room, a holographic display of the Galactic Empire's vast territories flickered in the air. The map was dotted with Imperial strongholds and patrol routes, a constant reminder of their overwhelming presence. Krell turned to Eric, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and desperation. "We need more than just hope, Kane. We need a plan. We're running out of time, and the Empire's forces are closing in. Soon, they'll discover this base." Eric studied the map intently, his military instincts kicking in. "You can't keep fighting like this," he said, his voice steady. "Defensive tactics only work for so long. The Empire has the resources to outlast you. You need to strike at the heart of their power." "Easier said than done," Reyna chimed in, her voice tinged with doubt. She had been observing Eric since his arrival, curious but cautious. "The Galactic Empire has entire fleets at their disposal. We barely have enough ships to protect ourselves, let alone launch an attack." Eric turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "You don't need fleets to win a war. You need strategy. You need to make them fear you. A well-placed strike at the right time can do more damage than any full-scale assault." Krell, ever the realist, crossed his arms. "And where exactly do we strike, Kane? The Empire controls hundreds of systems. We can't just attack blindly." Eric nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. "We need to find their weak points. Every empire has them. A supply route, a communications hub, something that, if taken down, will force them to divert resources. Once they're scrambling, that's when you hit them where it hurts." The room fell silent for a moment as the rebels processed Eric's words. He was right. If they kept fighting defensively, they'd eventually be wiped out. But going on the offensive was a risk, and one they weren't sure they could afford to take. Just then, a transmission came through on the command console. The image of a frantic rebel scout flickered onto the screen. "Commander Krell, we've spotted an Imperial patrol in the sector. They're closing in fast. We estimate they'll reach the moon within hours." Panic rippled through the room. The Empire had found them. Krell clenched his fists. "Damn it, we don't have the firepower to hold them off." Eric stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Then don't fight them here. Evacuate the base. Take everything of value and leave nothing behind. Make it look like this was an abandoned outpost. Let the Empire waste their time searching for something that isn't there." Krell blinked, surprised by the decisiveness of the human's plan. "And what about us? Where do we go?" Eric glanced at the map again, his eyes landing on a small, lightly guarded Imperial outpost on the fringes of the Empire's territory. There, he said, pointing to the location. It's far enough from the main Empire strongholds that they won't expect an attack. If we hit it fast, we can capture their supplies and gather intelligence on their movements. It'll buy us time and give us an shadows of the Empire. As Eric Kane settled into the rebel outpost beneath the surface of the moon, the reality of the situation began to weigh on him. He'd been revived into a galaxy that was no longer his own. A galaxy ruled by fear and oppression under the iron grip of the Galactic Empire. The human race, once powerful, was now little more than a forgotten legend. Inside the outpost, Krell led Eric through narrow corridors, the dull hum of the facility's machinery reverberating through the metal walls. Rebels moved about with purpose, though their numbers were small. They were a mix of different alien races, each with their own scars from the Empire's reign of terror. Some looked at Eric with skepticism, unsure if this ancient human warrior could really help turn the tide. Others saw him as a symbol of hope, a reminder of a time when humans had once been feared and respected throughout the galaxy. In the command room, a holographic display of the Galactic Empire's vast territories flickered in the air. The map was dotted with Imperial strongholds and patrol routes, a constant reminder of their overwhelming presence. Krell turned to Eric, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and desperation. We need more than just hope, Kane. We need a plan. We're running out of time, and the Empire's forces are closing in. Soon, they'll discover this base. Eric studied the map intently, his military instincts kicking in. You can't keep fighting like this, he said, his voice steady. Defensive tactics only work for so long. The Empire has the resources to outlast you. You need to strike at the heart of their power. Easier said than done. Rena chimed in, her voice tinged with doubt. She had been observing Eric since his arrival, curious but cautious. The Galactic Empire has entire fleets at their disposal. We barely have enough ships to protect ourselves, let alone launch an attack. Eric turned to her, his gaze unwavering. You don't need fleets to win a war. You need strategy. You need to make them fear you. A well-placed strike at the right time can do more damage than any full-scale assault. Krell, ever the realist, crossed his arms. And where exactly do we strike, Kane? The Empire controls hundreds of systems. We can't just attack blindly. Eric nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. We need to find their weak points. Every empire has them. A supply route, a communications hub, something that, if taken down, will force them to divert resources. Once they're scrambling, that's when you hit them where it hurts. The room fell silent for a moment as the rebels processed Eric's words. He was right. If they kept fighting defensively, they'd eventually be wiped out. But going on the offensive was a risk, and one they weren't sure they could afford to take. Just then, a transmission came through on the command console. The image of a frantic rebel scout flickered onto the screen. Commander Krell, we've spotted an Imperial patrol in the sector. They're closing in fast. We estimate they'll reach the moon within hours. Panic rippled through the room. The Empire had found them. Krell clenched his fists. Damn it. We don't have the firepower to hold them off. Eric stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. Then don't fight them here. Evacuate the base. Take everything of value, and leave nothing behind. Make it look like this was an abandoned outpost. Let the Empire waste their time searching for something that isn't there. Krell blinked, surprised by the decisiveness of the human's plan. And what about us? Where do we go? Eric glanced at the map again, his eyes landing on a small, lightly guarded Imperial outpost on the fringes of the Empire's territory. There, he said, pointing to the location. It's far enough from the main Empire strongholds that they won't expect an attack. If we hit it fast, we can capture their supplies and gather intelligence on their movements. It'll buy us time and give us an advantage. Rena, still skeptical, raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we abandon our base to go on the offensive. That's risky. Eric smiled faintly. War is always risky, but if you want to survive, You have to make the enemy think you're everywhere and nowhere at once. Keep them guessing. Keep them afraid. Krell hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Do it. Start the evacuation. The room sprang into action, rebels rushing to gather supplies and prepare the ships for departure. Eric watched them work, his mind already thinking ahead to the next phase of the plan. This was just the beginning. As the last of the supplies were loaded onto the ships, Krell approached Eric. You seem awfully calm for a man who's just woken up to find his entire species is gone. Eric's expression hardened. Humanity isn't gone. Not yet. As long as I'm alive, we still have it. With that, the ships lifted off, leaving the moon behind as the Empire's patrol ships closed in on the now empty base. Eric Kane, the eternal human warrior, was ready to bring the fight to the galaxy. Striking the Empire, the rebel fleet silently cruised through the void, the stars outside their viewports shining like distant, cold witnesses. Eric Kane sat in the command room of their lid ship, studying the holographic display of their target, a remote Imperial outpost. It was small, mostly used for communications, and lightly guarded. It wouldn't stay that way for long if the Empire realized they were coming. We need to hit hard and fast, Eric said, his voice low but firm as he addressed Krell and the other rebel leaders. If we can take this outpost before they have a chance to send a distress signal, we'll not only have access to their supplies, but their communication network as well. Krell stood next to him, arms crossed. He trusted Eric's military mind, but the risk still weighed on him. We've got one shot at this, Kane. If we fail, the Empire will hunt us down, and there'll be nowhere left to run. Eric looked up from the display, his gaze steady. That's why we won't fail. The element of surprise is on our side. We make it quick, precise, and devastating. The moment they realize what's happening, it'll already be too late. Rena, standing behind Krell, spoke up, her voice calm but sharp. Our forces aren't exactly trained soldiers. Some of them can barely fire a blaster straight. What happens when they panic under fire? Eric turned to her, his expression unreadable. They'll follow my lead. Fear is powerful, but so is purpose. They're not fighting for themselves anymore. They're fighting for survival, for freedom. When the time comes, they'll find their strength. The room fell into a tense silence. The rebels knew what was at stake, and even though doubts lingered, there was no turning back now. As the fleet approached the target, the rebel ships powered down to minimize their detection. The Imperial outpost loomed ahead, orbiting a desolate, rocky planet. It was small, just a handful of ships guarding it. Nothing compared to the massive fleets of the Empire. Krell glanced at Eric. Once we take the outpost, what's next? We can't stay here for long. The Empire will eventually realize something's wrong. Eric gave a faint smile. That's the point. Once we take the outpost, we'll use their own communications against them, send false signals, disrupt their patrols, and buy ourselves time. Time to build a real resistance. Krell nodded, his confidence growing. I hope you're right. The attack began with surgical precision. The rebel ships struck with coordinated fire, disabling the outpost's external defenses before they could react. Inside, alarms blared as the Imperial forces scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Eric, Krell, and a small team of rebels breached the facility, moving through the narrow corridors like shadows. They encountered resistance, but Eric's leadership kept them steady. Blaster fire echoed through the halls as they fought their way toward the control center. Eric moved with the grace of a warrior who had lived through countless battles, his instincts sharp despite the centuries of sleep. He dispatched enemy soldiers with calculated efficiency, his every movement a reminder of the power humanity once held. Rena and Krell covered his flanks, the rebels following close behind. Despite their earlier doubts, the sight of Eric in action had inspired them. They pushed forward with renewed determination, their fear replaced by something stronger, hope. As they reached the control room, Eric quickly accessed the Imperial systems, using codes and tactics long forgotten by the Empire. Within minutes, he had control of the outpost's communications, blocking any outgoing distress signals. "We're in," Eric said, his voice calm but focused. "Start downloading everything, intel, patrol routes, anything we can use. And set charges on the power core. We're not leaving this place intact." Krell and Rena moved to carry out the orders, while Eric remained at the console, studying the Imperial data. His eyes narrowed as he came across something that made his heart race, a name he hadn't heard in over a century. Valis. He muttered under his breath, his mind racing with memories of a time long past. Krell noticed the change in Eric's demeanor. "What is it?" Eric hesitated for a moment before answering. Valis was one of the Empire's greatest generals, back when humanity still had a place in the galaxy. If he's still alive, he's more dangerous than anyone in this war. Rena looked at him, her expression serious. "So what do—" Eric's face hardened. "We find him. And we make sure he knows that humanity isn't gone. Not yet." The rebel forces worked quickly, gathering what they could from the outpost systems and setting the charges to destroy the facility. Within minutes, they were back on their ships, leaving behind only destruction. As the outpost erupted in a fiery explosion, Eric watched from the viewport, his mind already planning their next move. The Empire would soon know that someone had struck against them, and they would retaliate. But this time, they wouldn't be facing just any resistance. This time, they'd be facing a human warrior, the General's shadow. The rebel fleet drifted silently through the cold expanse of space, away from the smoldering ruins of the Imperial outpost. The atmosphere inside the command ship was thick with a mix of triumph and uncertainty. Eric Kane stood at the large viewport, watching the distant stars, his mind a storm of thoughts. Krell approached cautiously, his usual confident demeanor tempered by the weight of their recent victory. "We took the outpost. The intel we gathered could change the course of this war," Krell said. "But you seem distant, Kane." Eric didn't turn to face him. His eyes remained fixed on the stars. "There's something in that data, something I didn't expect." Rena joined them, her sharp gaze flicking between the two men. "You mean the name you mentioned, Valis. Who is he?" Eric took a deep breath, finally turning to face them both. General Valis was one of the Empire's most feared commanders, back when humanity still fought openly in the galaxy. He's a brilliant strategist, a ruthless warrior. If he's alive, if he's involved in this war, he's our greatest threat. Krell frowned. "But the Empire has hundreds of generals. What makes him so special?" "He knows how humans think," Eric replied, his voice grim. "He fought us when we were at our peak, and he's one of the few people who knows the truth about the fall of humanity." Rena folded her arms. "What truth?" Eric's gaze darkened. "Humanity didn't just lose a war against the Empire. We were betrayed by our own allies. Valis was there when it happened. He knows our secrets, our strengths. And if he's involved in the Empire's efforts now, he'll do whatever it takes to stop us." The room fell silent as the weight of Eric's words settled over them. The victory they had just achieved suddenly felt smaller, more fragile in the face of this new revelation. "What's our next move?" Krell asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Eric turned back to the viewport, his expression hardening with resolve. "We can't wait for Valis to come after us. We need to find him first, take the fight to him. If we let him dictate the battlefield, we'll lose. But if we strike before he's ready, we might stand a chance." Rena narrowed her eyes. "And where do we start?" Eric stepped over to the central console, tapping in commands that brought up the data they had taken from the outpost. A holographic map of the surrounding systems appeared, highlighting a cluster of planets in the outer rim. "There," Eric said, pointing to a distant, desolate planet on the edge of the map. "Valis has been operating from a hidden base out here. It's remote, lightly defended. If we move fast, we can catch him before he has time to prepare." Krell studied the map. It's a risky move. We don't have the numbers for a full assault, and if Valis is as dangerous as you say, we'll be walking into a trap." Eric's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "Then we'll just have to spring the trap before he does." The journey to the outer rim was long and quiet, the rebel fleet staying on high alert as they traveled through Imperial space. Tension ran high among the crew, but Eric's presence kept them focused. He was more than just a leader to them now. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of impossible odds, humanity could still fight back. As they neared the hidden base, the rebels prepared for battle. Eric stood before his gathered forces, addressing them with the quiet authority that had come to define him. "We've struck a blow against the Empire, but this war is far from over," he began, his voice carrying through the ranks. "Today, we go after one of their greatest generals, someone who has stood against humanity before and won. But this time, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for our future." The rebels listened intently, their fear giving way to determination as they looked to their leader. "We may not have the numbers they do," Eric continued, "but we have something they don't. We have the will to survive, the will to fight for each other. That's what makes us stronger, and that's what will carry us through." Krell and Rena stood at Eric's side, their own resolve mirrored in the faces of the rebels around them. They had come this far together, and now they would face their greatest challenge yet. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace, the hidden base coming into view on the barren planet below. It was a small facility, its defenses minimal, but Eric knew better than to trust appearances. Valis would be waiting for them. As the rebels launched their attack, Eric led the charge, his every movement precise and deliberate. They struck quickly, overwhelming the base's defenses before the Imperial forces could mount a proper response. But as they breached the facility's outer walls, Eric felt a familiar presence lurking in the shadows. Valis was here. Eric's heart pounded in his chest as they moved deeper into the base, the corridors dark and eerily silent. He could sense the trap closing around them, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far. As they approached the central command room, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a figure standing at the far end of the room. Clad in the black armor of the Empire, General Valis turned to face them, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto Eric's. "So, the last human warrior returns," Valis said, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "I've been expecting you." Eric's jaw tightened as he stepped forward, his hand hovering over the hilt of his blaster. "Then you know why I'm here." Valis smiled, a cruel, predatory grin. "You've come to die, Kane, just like the rest of your kind." The room filled with tension as the two warriors faced off, the weight of their shared history pressing down on everyone around them. But Eric wasn't here to die. He was here to fight. And this time, he wouldn't stop until the Empire was broken. Battle of Wills. The rebel fleet hovered over the barren planet where General Valis awaited them. Inside the command ship, Eric Kane stood beside Krell and Rena, watching as their forces prepared for the final assault. The hidden Imperial base stretched below, ominously quiet after the initial breach. It was clear to everyone that this was no ordinary battle. This was a test of wills between two formidable warriors, Eric and Valis. The air inside the ship was thick with anticipation. Every rebel knew they were up against more than just soldiers. Valis was a master of strategy, and his base was a carefully laid trap. But Eric had a plan of his own. "We're going in fast and hard," Eric announced to his team. "The longer we wait, the more time Valis has to counter us. We strike now, take him by surprise." Krell nodded, his jaw tight. "He's expecting us." "What if he's ready?" Eric's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we improvise. But we don't hesitate. Valis is playing a game, but he's underestimating one thing: human unpredictability." Rena stepped forward, her hand resting on her blaster. "I'm with you, Eric. We all are. But if Valis knows how you think, won't that work against us?" Eric turned to her, his expression calm despite the storm raging around them. Valis knows how I used to think. He's seen the human race at its best, at its strongest. But we've changed. We've adapted. He doesn't know what we've become. With that, Eric signaled the attack, and the rebels descended upon the base with precision. Their ships swooped low, dropping soldiers into the thick of battle, as blasters fired and explosions lit up the barren landscape. The rebels fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, determined to take down the Empire's most dangerous. The rebel forces pressed on, but the casualties were mounting. Every step closer to the heart of the base seemed to come with a cost. Krell and Rena fought at Eric's side, their loyalty to him and the cause pushing them through the chaos. Suddenly, the base's interior shook with a violent explosion. Eric glanced at the readings on his wrist console. It wasn't their doing. "Valis is collapsing the tunnels," Krell shouted. "He's trying to trap us." "Not yet," Eric replied, his voice calm. "He wants us to think we're losing, but we're not playing by his rules." They reached a massive blast door at the end of the corridor, the entrance to the central command chamber. Eric signaled to Rena, who quickly began hacking the control panel. "We're almost through," she muttered, her fingers moving rapidly over the keys. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the vast, dimly lit command center. Valis stood at the far end, surrounded by holographic displays showing the chaos outside the base. His hands clasped behind his back, he turned to face Eric and his team with a cold smile. "Welcome, Kane," Valis said, his voice low and menacing. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." Eric stepped forward, his blaster at the ready. "So have I." Valis laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "You've come all this way, led your people into this trap. And for what? A chance to relive the glory days of humanity. You're too late, Kane. Your kind is broken. The galaxy has moved on without you." Eric's expression hardened. "We're still here. And as long as we're still here, the fight isn't over." Valis's eyes narrowed. "You've always been stubborn, but that's not going to save you this time." Before Valis could act, Eric fired. The shot was fast, precise, but Valis anticipated it. He activated a personal shield, deflecting the blast as he drew his own weapon, moving with the deadly grace of a predator. The room erupted into a furious battle. Eric and Valis exchanged fire, each move calculated, each shot a test of the other's skill. Krell and Rena provided cover, taking out Imperial soldiers as they flooded into the chamber. Valis was fast, but Eric was faster. Years of fighting, surviving, and adapting had honed him into a warrior unlike any other. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for the future of his people. As the battle raged on, Valis found himself on the defensive. Eric's relentless attacks, combined with his team's coordination, were overwhelming even for the seasoned general. For the first time, Valis's calm demeanor cracked. "You're making a mistake, Kane," Valis shouted over the chaos. "You can't win this war. Even if you kill me, the Empire will crush you." Eric didn't hesitate as he closed the distance between them, his eyes locked on Valis. "Maybe, but we're going to make sure they remember us." With a final devastating blow, Eric struck Valis down. The Imperial general fell to the ground, defeated, his cold eyes staring up at the man who had bested him. As Valis took his last breath, Eric stood over him, victorious, but not triumphant. He knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. But for now, humanity had struck a blow against the Empire that would resonate throughout a new dawn. The aftermath of the battle left the rebel forces in a state of exhaustion, but also with a renewed sense of hope. The Imperial base had been neutralized, General Valis had fallen, and for the first time in years, the galaxy had seen a true blow struck against the Empire's power. But Eric Kane knew that this victory, though monumental, was only a stepping stone toward a much larger fight. Standing at the edge of the command deck, Eric gazed out at the stars. The wreckage of the base still burned on the planet below, but the sky above was clear. For now, they had peace. Krell walked up beside him, his usual sharp tones softened by the gravity of their recent battle. "We did it, Eric. Valis is gone. His forces are in disarray." Eric nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the stars. "One battle, Krell. This war is far from over." Rena joined them, her face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "The Empire will come looking for us. Valis wasn't just any general. His death will send shockwaves through their ranks." Eric sighed. He knew she was right. The Empire would not let this defeat go unanswered. They would regroup, send new forces, and make an example of any rebellion that dared stand against them. But the message had been sent. Humanity was not broken, and they would not be ruled by fear. "We'll be ready," Eric said firmly. "They can send their fleets, their soldiers, and their strongest generals. But we're not the same as we once were. We've learned. We've adapted." He turned to face his team, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. "This fight isn't just about survival anymore. It's about freedom. The Empire may have its strength, its weapons, but we have something they'll never understand: our will to fight, to rise above every obstacle they throw at us." Krell crossed his arms, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I think we've proven that. Valis thought he had us figured out, and look where that got him." Rena nodded. "And we have the support of the people now. After this victory, more systems will join the rebellion. The Empire is not invincible. We've shown them that." Eric allowed himself a small smile, though the determination in his eyes never wavered. "They'll come for us, but they'll find more than they bargained for. Humanity has always thrived when the odds were against us. This is just the beginning." As the rebel fleet began to pull away from the planet, Eric's thoughts turned to the future. The Empire's grip on the galaxy had been unshakable for so long, but cracks were starting to form. They had given the galaxy a reason to hope, to fight back. In the days following Valis's defeat, word of the rebellion's victory spread across the stars. The Empire scrambled to maintain control, but the news was unstoppable. Systems that had once been too afraid to defy the Imperial rule now whispered of rebellion, of standing up for freedom. Eric's name became a rallying cry, not just for humanity, but for every species that had suffered under the Empire's tyranny. He hadn't sought fame or recognition, but the galaxy had found its hero in him, a symbol of resistance, of resilience. On board the rebel command ship, preparations for the next phase of their campaign were already underway. Eric met with his commanders, mapping out new strategies, planning new strikes. But in the quiet moments, when he was alone, the weight of the war pressed down on him. He knew that each victory came at a cost, and more battles lay ahead. The Empire was vast, its resources seemingly endless. But Eric also knew that the human spirit, once ignited, was a force that could not be easily extinguished. "We'll need allies," Krell said one evening, breaking the silence. "The Empire is too big for us to take on alone." Eric nodded. "I've already started reaching out. There are other systems, other species who have suffered under the Empire. They just need a reason to believe they can fight back." Rena, seated at the tactical table, looked up from the holographic map. "We've given them that reason. Valis was one of their best, and we took him down. That sends a message." Eric leaned over the table, his gaze intense. "The message isn't just for the Empire. It's for everyone. We're not fighting just for ourselves, but for every species that's been crushed under Imperial rule. This war is bigger than any of us." He stood up, looking around at his closest allies, the ones who had fought beside him from the beginning. "The galaxy has changed, and we're going to be the ones who decide its future." As the rebel forces prepared for their next mission, Eric knew that the road ahead would be long and dangerous. But with each victory, the fire of rebellion grew stronger. And as long as there was a spark, humanity would keep fighting, no matter